Hello, I am Dr. Maanda Tshifularo, Director for the Center for Leadership and Dialogue here at GIBS Business School. And I am in studio for a fantastic dialogue. And today I'm having a conversation with Prof.Wiseman Nkuhlu. He recently published a fine book, a very rich book titled Purposeful Leadership for Africa in the 21st Century. He's talking about where that is, where that was, where it is now, and where it needs to be. So today we are talking about purposeful leadership. And I think that this hour that we allocated might not be enough. And for that reason, already at the onset, let me say that I would like to encourage each and every one of you to get your own copy of Purposeful Leadership for Africa in the 21st Century by Prof. Wiseman Nkuhlu. So, Prof. Wiseman, welcome to studio.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me.
Lovely. So we will dive straight into the book as we were talking before. This book is rich. We can have like multiple episodes kind of coming at it in different angles. And today we want to attempt to cover this in just 45 minutes to an hour. Now, I ask all the authors all the time this question. Writing a book, which I've done myself, it's a painful, it's a long process. It requires just way too much. I just wonder what's happening in our country or in the continent that called this book forth. Why, of all the many things you could be doing, you decided to write a book?
No, thank you very much. Yes, you are right. Writing a book is not an easy job. I started the book in 2021. Yes, I've been working on it and put it away and think about it and so on. But the reason for writing the book is simply that I've been involved in African development projects and programs for the good part of my professional life. First as a lecturer at the university, and then university principal, and then later on I got involved as chairman of the Development Bank of Southern Africa. And later President Mbeki invited me to become his advisor on Africa. And in that capacity I worked on the new Partnership for Africa's Development. All this, gave me opportunities to dig deep, get an understanding of the intricacies that we face as African countries. So at some stages in my life, I felt that we're making good progress and that there was going to be a breakthrough. But unfortunately, we're now in the 21st century, the third decade of the 21st century, and Africa is still the least developed continent, and poverty is still, in terms of numbers, still increasing. So it is really an attempt to make my own contribution in terms of saying, yes, we have tried a number of policies, we've made a number of investments, but possibly there's something that needs more attention. And in this book, I touch on what I believe needs more focus.
And that's purposeful leadership.
Yes, two issues. Firstly, is the fact that I believe that as African countries, we have not given adequate attention to the issue of closing the gap in science and technology that developed between the so-called third world and the empires, Europe, during the 16th and 17th century. We have not done enough. It's closing that gap. Two, to close that gap, we need purposeful leadership. So those are the two things. There's the two main themes in the book. Is what we missed, and also how we'll be able to address and close that gap. And in my view, purposeful leadership is crucial in enabling us to close the gap.
Fantastic. Love this. So maybe how we unfold this conversation, we will do it like you've titled the book. where it was, where
Yes.
it is, and where it needs to be.
Yes.
Now, you provide a beautiful historic view of where we've come from as a
Yes.
continent.
Yes.
Could you maybe just, maybe we might not be able to cover everything, but
Yes.
some salient points from just our history as a continent?
Yes, Dr. Maanda, I felt that I needed to do that because when now you are a young person in Africa at the 21st century, you read and you experience that Africa is behind other civilizations. You may be depressed by that and feel that this continent has never since achieved anything of significance like other civilizations. So I thought in the book, let me go back and just remind the readers, the scholars, that in ancient times, Africa was the most developed continent. If one reads about Western civilization, they trace it to Greece.
Okay.
But if you read the work of philosophers, of Greek philosophers, they would tell you that they got their lessons from Egypt.
Right.
Egypt, Africa.
Right.
Yeah. And the people in Egypt at that time were Africans.
Yes.
You know, because the issue of people coming from the Middle East, it only happened much later. Those were Africans who actually developed the pyramids and introduced writing. So I felt that I have to remind the readers, the scholars, the leaders who are grappling with African challenges today, that Africa was great, was a leader in the world. Okay. And also I point out that all humanity has its origins in Africa.
Sure.
All civilizations, everyone in the world has origins in Africa. I thought that it's important to say that. Yeah. In those earlier chapters, I also share information about mining, gold mining, that was taking place at number of areas in Africa, West Africa, and also in Zimbabwe, and also just north of South Africa in Mapungubwe, the mining and the trading that was taking place between the African societies there with the Arabs on the coastline, and that, that trading, the mining, was at the same level as they were using the same technologies that were being used by other civilizations during that time.
Sure.
And also in terms of governments, they had very sophisticated systems of government.
Okay.
In the book, I mentioned that as far back as 10th and 11th century AD, the ancient Ghana had an army of over 200,000 men, army.
Sure.
And organizing that, feeding those people, housing them, and really training them. And there's evidence that they were capable of doing all that. So the first part of the book is just to reassure the African people that we're great.
Lovely.
And we were at the same level as other civilizations.
Lovely.
Until, of course, disturbances.
Yes, now
which,
what
of course,
went
the
wrong?
disturbances came much later.
Yes, now let's talk about what went wrong.
Yes, if one reads history, especially modern history that is in the new era, for quite some time, really, up to about the 18th century, the most advanced economy in the world was China. They were the biggest manufacturers in the world, and really very sophisticated industries. But then they had from time to time their own experiences of what later in the West was called Renaissance. They had their own renaissances, rebirth from time to time, where there will be suddenly emergence of new technologies. For instance, in China, it was around in the 10th century when they discovered gunpowder and also printing and so on and so on. And then this in history has been happening, that at one time one civilization would take a leap forward and leave others behind and so on and so on. But then it just happened then that during the 15th century onwards, for the first time, the Western countries, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and so on, and those kind of countries, they managed it happened that they had a number of revolutions or reformations. The most significant ones was what was called the Renaissance, art, renewal in art, rebirth in art, of great artists that emerged during that time. Another one was Reformation of the Catholic Church being challenged by new reformers and changing the way that people relate to God and so on, and thinking about their own responsibility and accountability as individuals. Then Enlightenment, then the Scientific Revolution. All those revolutions of Renaissance, Reformation, Scientific Revolution enabled Europeans to acquire new knowledge and new technologies, which they used to, one, be able to build new ships that could travel the seas, and also to develop new weapons, to manufacture new weapons that they could use to conquer other civilizations. And because of the fact that Europeans had a long history of aggression and warmongering, they were always fighting among each other. So when they had this opportunity of acquiring these advanced weapons, they used them to actually conquer other civilizations. And it is during that time, from the 15th, especially during the 17th and the 18th century, that major civilizations across the globe were conquered by the Europeans, including South Americans, the Chinese, the Indians, and Africans. That opportunity that they had to leap ahead in terms of technology, in terms of weaponry, they used them to conquer the rest of the world. It's when things then, Africa fell behind. Africa was, the Europeans used the advances in science, technology, and military equipment to conquer Africa and to subdue African kingdoms, and actually also introduce their own civilizations. And it is from that time, I would say mainly from the 17th and the 18th century, that Africa started to fall behind.
And if you track us now to where we're at, how far are we in possibly catching up?
Yes, actually, that's a very important question. As I've already indicated, Europeans managed to conquer most civilizations, including the Asian countries, and so on. So what happened then is that they, of course, the scientific revolution led to the Industrial Revolution, which again gave them more power, to conquer other nations and also and actually bully them and humiliate them, as we all know that it happened. Then the aggression, I would say also arrogance, hubris, whatever you want to call it, got to their heads. And because of this militarism, having conquered all the other civilizations, they turned on each other during the First World War, because they couldn't be satisfied. They were so much aggressive in their culture always believing that if there are differences, you solve differences through war by killing your opponents.
Sure.
So that culture led to the First World War,
Sure.
where they killed each other, almost annihilated each other.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then there was the Second World War, which also they almost completely, as a result of the Second World War, the empires of Europe that were responsible for conquering and colonizing the rest of the world were humiliated, defeated.
Yeah.
You know, of course, we all know what happened to Germany, but at the same time, France and United Kingdom were also destroyed in that process.
Yeah.
And that created opportunities, actually created an opportunity for them to rethink that this thing of this obsession with the use of force to deal with other civilization, it has almost destroyed their own civilizations.
Sure.
Therefore, now a new culture with new values started to emerge, that possibly there should be tolerance and recognition, possibly and so on. You know, that created the opportunity then for countries like India to re-emerge and China to re-emerge after that. And the difference then between how they emerged and how Africa emerged post the Second World War is that especially China and India, they reconnected with their own culture.
Right.
Their culture had actually what this was really unique and important about Chinese culture was the fact that Chinese respected education.
Sure.
They valued and educated education.
Yeah.
So when they got their freedom, most of the Chinese countries with Chinese background, culture, they prioritize education, and that's how it came about then that post the Second World War. Of course, Japan had managed to develop before that, but I'm going to not touch on that. But what happened after the Second World War? Countries like Taiwan, like Singapore, like Malaysia, like Korea, all of them with a strong Chinese influence. They prioritized education and scientific advancement.
Sure.
You know, learning from the Europeans and introducing that and inculcating those values and mindsets of scientific mindsets in their own people. And then that enabled them to catch up.
Sure.
Right. And of course, we know that China, unfortunately, they went the direction of communism. And communism kills initiative.
Sure.
And because they had gone the communist route, and they had revolution after revolution, and that delayed their own renaissance.
I see.
Until 1978, when a new leader emerged and said, China then reconnected with its roots, valued education and science, and also, informed and imbued by their pride in knowing that their civilization was a leading civilization in the past.
Sure.
And that there's no reason why they cannot lead again.
Sure.
So it is why that they prioritize the whole question of education, scientific advancement, and really that became the core of their economic renewal, was education, scientific advancement. In their industry development policies, they were prioritizing scientific advancement as well, of course, the infrastructure that they prioritize. So the focus was really their first priority was on people, equipping people with scientific knowledge and capabilities, and then building and the scientific and technical capability of their countries. I think that's why we missed it.
So beautiful narration there, and then we missed it how?
we missed it because I think our own culture, by the time that we got destroyed. Our economies, kingdoms got destroyed by the Europeans.
Yeah.
We're not as advanced as the Chinese.
Okay.
That's the first thing.
Okay.
And also education had not really become really integrated and embedded in our culture to the same extent as China and India.
Okay.
So when we started, our African countries started getting their independence from the middle 50s, especially from the 60s onwards.
Yeah.
Most of our scholars had been educated in the West.
Yes.
My view is that they sort of focused on catching up with the West.
Sure.
And doing up the things that the Western countries were doing.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the policies and priorities that they were actually mimicking were policies and interventions that Europeans had introduced after they had actually established a scientific and technological foundation.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Because remember, when African countries were obtaining their freedom in the 1960s, say 1950s, Europeans had actually, European countries had been industrialized for more than 200 years.
Sure.
Remember, in Europe, the Industrial Revolution dates back to about 1750. So by the time we got our freedom, they had reached a far advanced stage of development.
Yeah.
So the policies that they were prescribing to us were policies of developed countries.
Sure.
Not the policies that you need and programs that you need when you are taking off.
Sure.
To me, that's the biggest mistake, oversight that we did. And they pushed these policies and so on, which really were fit and proper for developed countries far ahead of our standard of development. So because of that, this gap in science and technology between Africa and Europeans has not been closed.
Sure.
We have not aggressively pursued policies to close the gap in the same way that India and China have actually done.
Right. Oh, this is beautiful. And I mean, it's such a fresh perspective. I don't think a lot of people have thought about where we're at.
Yes, Maanda, I've been thinking about that, really I've read lots of books about African development, why things are not going right. I've no doubt in my mind, I agree with most of our authors on African, especially Africans, that the neoliberal policies have not worked for Africa, and possibly we should not overemphasize the importance of us just adopting liberal democratic policies. It's true. But when you listen to what the people say, they would say that we must be more socialistic.
Yes.
It must be not this, it must. Yes. Socialism is also the same thing. It's also an ideology of the West, quite frankly.
Sure.
But if really we want to be serious, we better learn from the countries that were humiliated and destroyed like us and managed to rebuild themselves.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
So the lessons have to come from China. And remember what I said, the Singapore is a Chinese country, Korea, Taiwan, all the countries that have, because of their approach to education and scientific development. And the fact that they had this deep pride in themselves, that they were once a leading civilization in the world. So they said, let's find out why these Western countries suddenly are now the leaders. They sent delegation to come and understand the scientific ideas that now have given the Europeans an upper hand. And then they said, let's focus on those, learn those, and make sure that we integrate them in our own culture and equip our people appropriately.
Sure, right, lovely. So if we stay with this, so do you get the sense that we can easily define our own culture and those things that made us win in the past? Is that somewhat crystallizable?
Not quite, Maanda. My view is that the cultures of the world have become integrated.
Sure.
They have become integrated, and really, the challenge to us is to find, is to learn from the experiences of other countries, and distill those things that have enabled those countries to make progress. And then, of course, we cannot suddenly make ourselves Europeans. We can never be Europeans.
Yes.
We're Africans.
Yes.
We have our way in terms of our culture.
Yeah.
The way that I relate to my parents, the way that my children relate to me, the way that I relate to the rest of the community and so on.
Yeah.
Those things, African.
Yeah.
And those kind of relationship values and the interactions, relations between families and communities and so on, the Europeans have gone their own way, and Asians have gone their own way, and we have got our own way. Yeah. There are those things that are fundamental in our culture, and they're there.
Okay.
But it's not only those things that are important for us to go forward. What is also equally important is this scientific mindset.
Right.
The rationality and scientific mindset that came with the scientific revolution. Remember, actually, if I, to dramatize this thing, I'm going to refer to a phrase that is used by Harari, the writer of Homo sapiens.
Yes, yes.
He says the greatest thing about the scientific revolution was the discovery of ignorance. Yeah, he says it was discovery of ignorance. Okay. He says, what the scientific revolution did was that it really challenged a fundamental way of looking at knowledge and wisdom that dominated all cultures up to that point. All cultures at that point were based on the idea that to learn anything as a youngster, you have to read, you have to listen to the elders.
Yes.
Learn from those who have been
teachers.
They teach. You learn from the elders, or you learn from the scriptures.
Yes.
You learn from the Quran, and so on.
Yeah.
Or you always learn from those who have been here before.
Yeah.
So it was unthinkable that a youngster can say through experiments, through observation and experiments or mathematical calculation, he can come up with new knowledge. It was unthinkable.
Okay.
So whoever would try doing that was always seen as a rebel.
Okay.
And in most cases, either the authorities would actually deal with that person, he would either be killed or something. When you really come up with innovative ways that are unknown or in that culture, something that is totally unknown, that will be looked at, in a very negative way. Yeah. But what the scientific revolution did was to say, for the first time, this belief that we had, that all knowledge
comes from
is already there, from previous, is wrong.
Sure.
We can, through experiments, through observation, through our own rational analysis, develop new knowledge. Okay. We can even equip ourselves with new capabilities that our old people didn't have. So what I'm saying is that it's important that the elements of your own culture that are important, that you must retain. But this kind of thinking that through science, you can develop new capabilities and be able to do things that your ancestors couldn't do. It's very, very important. Excellent. And that even now, today, that's actually where you see this thing very clearly. Is how the Asian countries, actually, it's much clearer in the case of China. Okay. the way that they elect their leaders, political leaders.
Yeah.
Because they were facing a scientific transformation, revolution, from 1978 that they had to lead.
Yeah.
They deliberately elected as their leaders scientists, engineers.
I see.
From the very first after Deng, they have been having engineers as heads of state.
Right.
And whoever gets appointed to a leadership position, even if you're a cabinet minister, it should be on the basis of your scientific knowledge and specialization in that area, and proven track record of actually practicing your skill. So that differentiates them. So on our side, we still not as clearly grasp the importance of scientific mindsets and the importance of science in moving from underdevelopment to development status, being have capacity to eradicate poverty.
Sure.
You know,
Lovely.
we have not really grasped it.
Sure.
So we still appoint people on the basis of possibly being good communicators.
Sure. And charisma. You have painted the beautiful picture on the first point, which is the scientific knowledge. Now, I would like for us to transition to the second point around purposeful leadership.
Yes.
And I want to just hear what that means. How is this different? How might it help us? If there is another historic narration of this, it will be beautiful.
Yes.
But we are now on the second point, purposeful leadership.
Yes, Dr. Maanda. You know, where this idea of purposeful leadership comes from is that history shows that all great leaders are leaders who were inspired by ideas that are bigger than themselves.
Sure.
And the things that we're endeavoring to achieve were not just about themselves as individuals or their political parties, were either a contribution to a nation or humanity.
Okay.
You can go back the great leaders. So this thing of inspiration, and if you look at the history of civilizations, leaders in the ancient times used to believe that they were anointed by gods. Yeah. So even in ancient times, leaders saw their responsibilities as being beyond just their families and themselves.
Sure.
They would say, you would see that through rituals and other means, they will always be in search of this connection with this power that has given them this responsibility.
Right.
Now, with science, we have to do it differently. We have to make sure that we have got the right qualifications and ability to understand the fourth revolution if we're going to. But the point that I'm making in the book is that, you know, during the time of independence revolution, if you look at Kwame Nkrumah, you look at Nyerere, those leaders were inspired by deep purposes, by what Simon Sinek calls a just cause. All of them were prepared to sacrifice their own lives because they felt that the humiliation of their people, the African people, by the empires was such that they were prepared to sacrifice their lives to get these people freed of this indignity of colonialism and oppression. So because of that, they were not inspired just by the desire to be in the office and use that to enrich myself and to be able to attend meetings at the United Nations and be pampered there. They had no idea that of those things. They were just saying that, given the condition of my people, I'm prepared to make this sacrifice. If it means me going to jail, let it be. If I got killed, let me be killed for that. So they inspired by visions, purposes that were greater than themselves. So the point that I'm making in the book then is that, yes, but over the years, post the independence era, we have got to a stage where it became fashionable
Sure.
for those who aspire for leadership to do so for the sake of enriching themselves and getting the prestige that goes with leadership, the pomp that goes with being a president, and so on and so on. And then you find that they were not focused really on improving the well-being and welfare of their own people.
Sure.
And they were not making the necessary sacrifices for that purpose, but it was just about enriching themselves. Okay. And hence, the stories about corruption and so on that have expanded in Africa. So the point that I'm making then is that for Africa to really take off, one of the requirements, prerequisites, is the emergence of purposeful leaders.
Okay.
And I say a purposeful leader in Africa during this time, what would be that great cause that should be at the core of one who wants to lead?
Yes.
It should be really an ambition to really overcome the stigma of Africa or South Africa being the most corrupt and the least developed country, and to say what is inspiring me is to work to make my country to achieve the status of a developed country in, say, 30 years, in a specified time. Yeah. You put in front of the people high aspiration by which they can be energized to work and really and work very hard to achieve. That appeals to everyone because that ambition is something that will be aimed at improving the well-being and welfare of everybody.
Yeah.
Now, again, I know that people have got, perceptions that nothing can come unless you are democratic. As the West says, you must be democratic.
Okay.
But the leaders I'm talking about are leaders like the first Prime Minister of Singapore.
Sure. Yeah.
If you look at him, read his history. Yeah. If you look at the first head of state of Taiwan, and you look at Korea, you will understand what I'm talking about. These leaders were really so focused on improving the well-being and welfare of their people, and that they were prepared. It was not about the leader himself. It was about the people. They made those sacrifices. They ruled for extended period of time, but there wasn't the rampant corruption that that you would find in most African countries. Even when it comes to competence, they had bureaucracies. They were very competent because they were very careful also in selecting the people to serve as ministers and senior officials in their governments, because they knew that to achieve the high ambition of closing the gap between their countries and the developed countries, they need the best equipped people in terms of education, in terms of values, and in terms of proven record of delivery in their cabinets. And this is what they did, getting the best in their governments to do that. So I feel that this issue of our leaders being inspired by causes that are bigger than themselves, primarily the issue of improving the well-being and welfare of your people being the supreme thing that inspires you, and also embracing a big vision, ambition, that the people, would inspire the people to really work hard to achieve that. And of course, you must exhibit that in your own lifestyle, in your own, the way that you carry yourself. There must be no suspicions, no doubts about you being committed to serving all the people of your country, not your political party, beyond your political party, beyond your tribe, beyond your ethnicity, and just the people of the country. Because remember, if you're elected a leader of a country, you are the servant of all the people of that country. There must be no doubt. The people must have no doubt about how you carry yourself, that you are committed, you are driven by what is best
Sure.
for the country and all of them. This is what we're missing, and it may be strange, but really, if you look at these countries that I've talked about, and you look at how China, for instance, is led from 1978, they come close to this description of a leader, of a purpose leader that I'm talking about. They even come we're human beings. They can never be perfect. There will always be accusations of corruption there and there. But overall, they led with vision, with competence, with integrity that really enable them to be very successful in achieving the objectives and lifting their countries from poverty to prosperity.
Oh, stunning. Now, I can't believe we are at the top of the hour. I'm just curious if there was some prescription from where we at. Maybe I will narrow this down to South Africa. What must now happen in the country to get there?
Well, it's very difficult to say what should happen. But really, well, the Chinese and other countries in Asia had this tradition of respecting education, valuing education. That was very entrenched. Popular, we may start there.
Sure.
We may start there.
Sure.
And just we as the educated class in South Africa, including workers and everybody, we demand that those who lead us at every level must be people who are properly qualified for that.
Sure.
You know, because we need to change the relationship of South Africans to education.
Okay.
You know, if really it's not just a question of education socializing you to be able to read English and be able to do that. But we say it equips you with specialized knowledge and capabilities to do things that other people with less education and training would not be able to do.
Sure.
So if we really take education seriously like that, then we would understand that to be a president of a country, you have to be, at least minimum, a doctorate in a discipline that is aligned to science and engineering, that enables you to understand deeply the fourth industrial revolution that we talk about. Because remember, if you are going to lead, Africa to really overcome poverty and close the gap between Africa or South Africa and the Western world, you must understand the technologies of today, the scientific drivers of progress of today. What these Asian countries did, Professor Marwala talks about this in his book on this fourth industrial revolution. He says that the third wave of the scientific revolution was the semiconductor revolution that produced computers, transistors, radios, and so on. That began around the late 40s, and then it developed during the 50s. And what these Asian countries did that really managed to catch up, they targeted those revolutions, the third wave of the scientific revolution, and equipped their people appropriately to actually take advantage of that. They also make sure that their industrial policies were directed at creating an infrastructure for their country to be leaders in that. It is true that deliberate, intentional, focused thinking and actions that they managed to become the greatest manufacturers of computers, of televisions, and so on. And they took advantage of the third wave of the Industrial Revolution. And really, now, for South Africa, for us to take off, that revolution is behind us. We have to do the same think the same way
Sure.
that the Asians thought. Now the challenge is the fourth industrial revolution. It comes with new opportunities and challenges. We should be making sure that we are led by people who don't understand these things superficially, but actually proven scientific training in them,
Sure.
so that we can actually be able to take advantage, position Africa and Africans in particular to take advantage of this wave to achieve what the Asian countries achieved by taking advantage of the third wave of the Industrial Revolution.
Sure. Wow. Right. I need to honor your time, but maybe one question will be, what's the one message to anyone listening to us? It could be a GIBS student, it could be a manager in any corporate. What's sort of the one or two things that they can take away from our time together?
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, I'm very clear in my own mind that it is possible for us as African people, in particular, to really take the right decisions and exercise the right disciplines to actually close the gap, achieve the same level of scientific development that the developed countries have achieved. In other words, create societies in which our people can enjoy the same standard of living in terms of incomes, in terms of the things that they require to really achieve and enjoy meaningful lives. It is possible. But really the challenge is leadership. The second challenge is, but of course, the leader, but let's understand that the main thing that we have to address for us to catch up and ensure our people and address poverty and unemployment sustainably, close the gap in science and technology. Use your education as the most potent instrument for equipping our people with the scientific and technological capabilities that are relevant for them to really participate meaningfully in the economy of today. So far, now, we still continue with education in our primary schools and our high schools. That really leaves our learners not equipped for meaningful participation in the economy of today. If you doubt that, look at the numbers of young people who are unemployed. We're talking of over 60%. Those people, those youngsters who are unemployed, most of them have got matric. Or possibly some of them have got university degrees. So really we're not using education as an instrument for scientific and technological transition of our societies from underdevelopment to developed status. So those are the things. We need leaders who really, let's look at education and scientific development differently and give it the respect that the Asians give it, and show that by the way that we select people for leadership positions. And with that, transform our education from grade R onwards to really be an instrument for scientific and technological advancement.
Oh, Prof. Wiseman, this is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for writing the book. Where can people access the book?
Thank you very much. The book, Purposeful Leadership for Africa in the 21st Century, is available at exclusive bookshop in all the branches, in Johannesburg, Pretoria, and of course Cape Town, and so on. But you can also get the book from Amazon. So thank you very much.
Excellent. And this is the book. When I see you the next time, I hope you also be having your own copy. Incredibly rich, incredibly powerful insights from Prof. Wiseman. So until next time, go out there and super lead.